Welcome to the C Word, the Conservatives podcast. Today we're talking about conflict and collections. I'm Jenna Mathiasson, an objects conservator based in Carmarthenshire.
And I'm Kloe Rumsey, an objects conservator based in Manchester.
Hey guys.
Welcome to episode 2.
No, 3.
Welcome to episode 3.
Seamless. I'll be able to edit that. Not to worry. Kloe, has it been a long week? We're recording on a Friday night, people.
Oh, it's fine. Everything's fine. I was off on Monday. I don't know what's going on.
It's all good. It's all good. To help us with today's topic, we've got a special guest host with us. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, I'm Karen Logan. I'm a senior curator of history with National Museums NI. So I manage a team of curators that cover history, archaeology and world cultures at the Ulster Museum and also the Ulster Transport Museum at Kloe. But my own background would be more around contemporary history and curating the Troubles.
Oh, amazing. That's
brilliant.
A big job. Love it.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Sometimes I feel like my schooling let me down in terms of contemporary history, and like anything really past the world wars, they were sort of like, and then some stuff happened. Now, granted, this is Sweden, so history works a little bit.
No, it's the same in England.
Oh God, is it? That's worse.
Yeah, I know, it really is. It really is.
Given how much happened,
England
don't worry
is
about
responsible for. Education in Essex in 2001. Man,
stellar.
Could be better.
Absolute A+. Yeah, love it. Excellent. Oh, well, I'm slightly distressed to hear that, to be honest. Because I was sort of hoping it was regional to me.
Yeah, no.
So I really enjoy seeing sort of more contemporary history, like anything from the World Wars on in museums, because then I'm like, I know way too little about this. This is where I want to be informed and think about stuff and be challenged and see stuff that, matters to people in living memory. Not that the World Wars aren't, still just about in living memory, just about. Those are the things that we, really ought to be exploring more. So I do love seeing that in museums, just as like an aside. Like I just love seeing that sort of stuff.
Well, that's the thing that's really important here, isn't it? It's the living memory, because you can sort of say whatever you like about the Victorians, because they're not going to answer you back.
To a certain degree, yes.
Whereas now I have the experience of writing a caption and then standing beside the person as they read what I've written about them.
Oh
no!
That is very different. Yeah, wow, that is a world apart, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a lot of pressure.
It is. It's a different challenge, and just keeping up to date because things keep moving on so quickly, and it dates really quickly.
But also, I guess, sort of capturing those sorts of memories and the things that, like before they fade from people's memories, because ultimately, as all humans get older, might not remember things as vividly as we once did. So, I mean, that's why I love oral history projects and stuff like that, where we really capture people's impressions of what happened, and their stories of what happened. Like, I think that sort of stuff is also so fascinating. But then I'm a big audio geek, as you might notice from running a podcast.
Are you Jenny? What? I can't see any sign of that.
No, definitely not. That's definitely not.
I think people find it so powerful as well to hear directly from somebody, just that personal.
It is powerful. Yeah, definitely. It is, definitely. And Kloe, but you work in a museum that does quite a lot of like contemporary collecting and stuff as well. So
I want to hear from Karen first, but I've got some stories from PHM that I think would be interesting to tell, because it's not the Troubles, but it is Brexit. And there's, why are we talking about this? It's when we say conflict, what do we mean?
Interesting, and I do like starting with a definition, as you know. So yeah, I guess I was thinking about this. This actually all stems back to a talk that I attended many moons ago. It was about displaying pieces of garment that were from essentially an assassination, and like actually showing them in tatters, and displaying them as they are, as opposed to patching them up or like maybe not overly stabilizing them, because they were stabilized, of course, but displaying them in like a patched format or amended format, because some people thought that was more respectful to the person who'd been wearing it, that they wouldn't want to be remembered as a martyr sort of thing. And other people were like, but it's really important that people know that sometimes it goes this far. like that sometimes these things happen, and that's an important part of our history. To my shame, I cannot remember where in the world this was. It was not in a European country, but it was a really interesting talk, and it just made me think of the sorts of decisions you have to make about collections when the stakes are of that sort. Like it's very different from something from way back in the day, or
someone's cat messed this up by accident.
Yeah, but I know we make these sorts of decisions all the time, really, because we always decide on how far we clean something, or what's an important part of the story. But it just felt so extreme. Like no one had told me that these could be the stakes sometimes, and that also the emotions that could be involved from the public, because there's never one side to a story. There are always different parties involved in everything, and the people had a lot of feelings. And even people who were like, we're on board with you displaying this, or like, this is a good exhibition, still had vastly different ideas of how it should be presented, let alone what should go on the caption, right? Like there were so many feelings involved, and I just thought, this is a great topic. There will be many examples of this around us, the things that are maybe contentious, or that are fresh in people's memories, or that stir up a lot of emotions. And I think they are really genuinely so important. And ultimately, sort of what art is in some ways, is something that stirs up emotion. And sometimes that sort of can be seen even in the social history side of things. That is something that makes you feel something. And that can be annoyance, or why is this here? Or it can be, I resonate with this, or it can be, I remember this. Like there are so many responses you can have. I guess that's it. That's the core of this topic, is sort of that. I thought that was so fascinating. Like, yeah, like I feel like that wasn't necessarily taught to us at the workbench. That sometimes.
No, but the example that is interestingly, the example that was taught to us was along the lines of, do you wash Nelson's jacket? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
no, that's
like,
true. We did talk about that.
Super interesting, but also, again,
further removed.
Victorians don't answer you back. They don't really.
Further removed.
It doesn't,
I mean, it's still important and still obviously a really vital thing to talk about, but it has that distance in history.
Yeah, but you're not going to have somebody's like daughter.
No, it might be descendants out there. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay.
It could still be stakeholders of that nature. But,
I'm not saying there are. Yeah.
But
So you and Karen had a chat about the topic because of your work on, was it the specific exhibition?
See, I bumped into Hannah at a conference, and I thought it was just so interesting what she was talking about, and particularly around the Troubles. And I'm going to ask, just for our international listeners, just for like a quick blurb about what the Troubles are, because I recognize that we have listeners all over the world, and they might not be familiar. But I found that so interesting, the way that she was talking about that. So Hannah put me in touch with Karen, and here we are, and talking about this. So that's sort of how that bit started.
Yeah, so just a bit of background on the Troubles. I suppose we would tend to refer to it as a civil and political conflict that began, most people would say, 1969, and most people would see the signing of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in 1998 as drawing that period to a close. So there are ongoing tensions, of course, but yeah, it would be that kind of 30-year period of violence in which over 3,500 people were killed, many more injured. But the important thing to note about it is that it is contested in terms of the events that took place and significance and meaning and responsibility within that. And we would often say, like, within that, while we have a shared past, we don't have a shared memory. So there are different accounts or different perspectives, and it's kind of acknowledging those different perspectives. That's part of the challenge in curating that and bringing those together.
Oh, I think that's such a good way of thinking about it.
That's amazing. And I think that I hadn't thought about it as no shared memory before. And that is really because you're used to thinking, I mean, and I will talk about this with Brexit. I think of it as, well, there are the facts. You're displaying the facts, but they're not necessarily. What are the facts? What is, if you're telling the story, then it's not just what is the story, but what is the story for different people, and other people's understand, different sides of the same coin.
Yeah, we would often say we're trying to bring these multiple perspectives together and curate them responsibly in context. That we're not trying to get any kind of agreed narrative or consensus. There is no consensus.
Exactly.
It's bringing those voices together in the same room and kind of just helping people to understand these different perspectives and begin to be more hospitable towards other narratives.
I mean,
I love that.
That's like a beautiful thing, isn't it? To at least have a space where you can see the different perspectives, even if you don't agree with them, but even start to get used to them. That's really good.
Pluralism without bias, it's sort of the fact that you're bringing those together. We would encourage kind of critical thought and put some challenges out there, but we don't try and resolve it.
It always makes me a bit wary, your museums aren't neutral and history is written by the winners. If you decide that there is no winner, there's just this mutual history, that you have to take a completely different approach to, say, the perhaps handed down narrative of previous conflicts that are in hindsight written by whoever came out on top. And you might find that there are, surviving stories from, say, oppressed groups or things like that, like squashed rebellions, all sorts of things like that throughout human history. You might find some of those accounts, but it's certainly not what is necessarily the official version of events, for example. So it's actually fascinating to sort of not have that official account hanging over you, that you deliberately don't walk that path. I think it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's still an evolving situation. It's still ongoing inquiries. There's still different things coming to light. And because the exhibition Troubles and Beyond doesn't end with signing of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, it goes right up to date. So that lets us look at some of the kind of legacy issues you mentioned earlier, around Brexit or language, culture, all these different ongoing aspects that we're still working through.
Because this is the community as it exists today. Those are still sort of things that are, still on people's minds.
Shall we talk about the Troubles and Beyond exhibition as a case study for this work then? So what led to it? Was it a sort of accumulation? Was it always the plan to do the exhibition? Or was it accumulation of a number of different events or topics?
So there's already a Troubles gallery there from 2009 when the Ulster Museum reopened after refurbishment. But that exhibition, it was all kind of black and white images and text. There were no objects in it. And it was very much the way you would have seen the Troubles presented in the media, kind of through the lens of a photojournalist. And it was thematic as well. So from the point that it opened, it was quite heavily criticised, those limitations of not having the objects, not giving different perspectives, just what we were just saying, not giving a sense of what it was like to live there, not having colour for a start, most our contemporary period of history, so no colour, no objects. So we knew that we had to address that. International visitors were actually a bit more positive. I think just maybe for them it was quite a sort of factual account, maybe more what they were used to seeing in the media, but definitely criticism from local audiences. So we knew had to address that. So and actually the process kind of began with colleagues of mine in art. So there were a couple of art exhibitions, Art of the Troubles and Silent Testimony, that came around 2014, 2015. And the response to that kind of showed us how much there was a need for history to do more to address this in the permanent galleries. So we applied to National Library Heritage Fund as part of their Collecting Cultures programme for the Collecting Troubles and Beyond project. So the exhibition was kind of born out of that project and the collection development and research engagement that came through that. So the aim of the project, it was to widen the scope of the collection, supported by greater academic and community engagement in order to enhance the interpretation of our recent past. So it went on for about 5 years, and the gallery was one of the outputs from that.
So what did the Collecting Cultures is also a project that my museum or event or funding body or whatever that my museum benefited from, I think in 2018, specifically on the centenary for the women's vote. So
who funded this?
It was NHLF, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, so it was NHLF. Okay.
Yeah. So it was. Am I right in thinking it's in financial encouragement to collect on a specific topic?
Yes,
I'm not a funding person, so I'm bad at this.
I want to develop in a particular area of the collection.
Yeah.
For us, that was just making that more representative and better able to represent this sort of complex period of history and more up to date. We already had quite a strong political collection, but it was making it also more inclusive in terms of social cultural history and more up to date as well. So that was an important aspect to it. And then we also built into the project not only the Troubles and Beyond exhibition, but other kind of temporary and touring exhibitions that helped and the engagement around that, and public engagement as well in terms of events and programming, and just having some of those conversations like we were just saying about, difficult objects. We had seminars around that. Like, is there anything we shouldn't include? If we are going to include, how do we present that? We had workshops and seminars around diverse voices, and just that what we're saying about bringing these different perspectives together in the one room. How do you do that responsibly? So there was a lot of kind of engagement and just encouraging dialogue and just saying to people that we're working on this, please get involved, please come forward with your own objects and stories. So we viewed it very much as a process and a really open process. It wasn't to say, right, we've got this funding, we're going to close the gallery, reopen, and that's it, we're done. It was a really open process and still is. The gallery's now been open just 5 years this week, and we're still making changes.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. So, we're still making changes and planning some more in the next couple of months. And it was designed to be able to respond to feedback and be quite a dynamic space. So.
Oh, brilliant.
Were there things that people thought shouldn't be included in terms of objects, I guess, more than stories? Although either, actually, what was the sort of feedback that you got from people?
We just had those conversations around the more difficult objects and came to the conclusion there wasn't anything necessarily we wouldn't include, but it was just back to that point of how were you going to present it. And in some cases, we maybe had like an additional piece of text, or we put it in a certain way in terms of how we presented and interpreted it. So things like, for example, some of the weapons, or we had like a car bomb, and we were looking at different types of sort of IEDs, and some of them it sort of showed the workings, like the wiring inside. Like there was a coffee jar bomb where you could see, and we were sort of having conversations around, do you want to present that to people? Like you can see how this thing is made. So it was conversations like that. We had lots of those kind of conversations about that line as well, in terms of whether you include any more graphic content or not. And some people sort of spoke about, communicating the horror. But I was always an advocate for, I want people to stay within that space. I don't want to make it so graphic or uncomfortable that people will leave.
That people want to run away from it, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
There is something about the immersion of, you want to tread that line, don't you, between communicating the horror, as you put it, and...
But you also don't want to give people PTSD.
Not getting the horror in.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a responsibility in that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That can be a really tricky balance. I remember going to a good talk. I want to say it was a police or justice museum. Oh, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry that I can't remember exactly what it was, but please write in and tell me. And they were talking about if it would be okay to have, for example, weapons on display, and if that would take away from thinking about the stories of the victims and things like that, if it would almost, be more about sort of the things that were done to them as opposed to they were people, and the reasons maybe that these sorts of crimes were committed and stuff like that. So it's sort of about, do we even include it? Because people expect it maybe, but that doesn't mean that we should do that. And I thought these were really interesting, again, sort of conflict adjacent questions where it's sort of about, well, what is it that we want to be showing? What is it we want to be telling people? And just because we have this, we may not want to put it on display. And if we do, we'll have to really think about how we actually do it.
What sort of objects did you collect during this time in the process of developing the exhibition?
Yes, so there were different kind of approaches to the collection development. So we had that open call where we just went out to people on the radio and press and everything and saying, come forward with your objects and stories. So there were some quite personal items that came through that. Some were on loan, some were donations. Then we kind of targeted particular gaps that we'd identified in the collection. So we maybe made some sort of purchases of things that we were keen to acquire and areas we were keen to develop. So some things as well around like LGBT history, for example, we knew we needed to develop that collection. So we approached different organizations, and just even through word of mouth and kind of the relationships that we built, that kind of grew really naturally and really successfully in this kind of network where people were working with us. Queer Space in Belfast was an example. They donated part of their archive, and then working with them and them recommending to others, the Ulster Museum's interested, they're collecting this material, give Karen a call. It was kind of spread really naturally and developed really well. And we're actually about to host Out in the Past LGBT History Festival again this year, and I'm really glad to be a partner in that. So it was things like that, trying to encourage people to come forward and just putting that message out there that we were interested in representing people's stories. Because I think particularly with contemporary collecting, some people were sort of, oh, you wouldn't be interested in that, or because it's maybe quite a common or simple object. Like, oh, that doesn't go in a museum. That's just something that's like in my cupboard. And
we get that all the time.
Yeah. So it was having those conversations with people to say, look, this is really important. And all kinds of things came forward. There was a wreath that a gentleman had kept. He had laid it in a skillen. He was part of the Boys Brigade. and he was bringing this to lay at Enniskillen, and the bomb went off. He kept it. So there were things like that had a sort of direct connection to the conflict. There were other things, sort of ex-service, ex-prisoners, all kinds of people coming forward, and some just more general around kind of the social history. Jimmy Ellis's widow, the actor James Ellis, came forward with an archive of objects relating to his life and career, which is fantastic, really big collection. So there were other kind of social, sporting things as well, and concert tickets, all kinds of things like that, as well as things relating more specifically to the Troubles.
Are you collecting still on what's happening to this day?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And we still have that call in the text within the exhibition. It says, if you feel something's missing or if you have your own object stories you want to come forward, and people still do. And we are still actively collecting and contemporary collecting around just ongoing, like even the pandemic and COVID-19. We have a display on that. We work with a group in partnership with Eastside Partnership and East Belfast Community Group. And they kind of collected objects relating to their experiences of the lockdown and the pandemic. And together we developed this display that is called Pandemics Past and Present. So it looks at, COVID-19, but also comes back to things like tuberculosis and Spanish flu, using objects from our own collection. So there's sort of activity like that that's ongoing that kind of is helping people represent and explore their experience of the pandemic.
And do you collect, because you do collect like a lot of contemporary collecting at your museum, Kloe, does that resonate with you, that you were like getting things that people think museums would never want? Because I feel like that's always how it is with modern stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that I've got some conservation stuff to say as well about that. Protest is in, right?
True. It
in
is in
museums. And I don't really know when it started, but I think it's at least in the last 4 years, at least, maybe longer. So I think people are used to, do you want this placard? Do you want these protest photos? Do you want this protest song? But if it's relating to important people, then like important activists, you're more used to thinking you might be interested in this because this is so-and-so's t-shirt, or this is, it
has the celebrity feel, right?
That they always want. Yeah, exactly. But I think particularly sort of people who have always been dismissed by society often just don't really think of themselves in that way. And it's the exhibitions, for example, the Nothing About Us Without Us, the disability activism exhibition that we've got on at the moment. It's the exhibitions that make people think, oh, wait, what I'm doing is important, or what I have been doing is important, or that, flag that I waved at this person, or this, ticket that I stole or illegally stamped on something, or, that bit of activism that I did in the 80s and then forgot about is important. So
it still counts.
It's not just about telling the story that you have collected as a museum. It's also getting people to think about their own activism or their own life history or memories and put them more on a sort of pedestal of, yes, this is significant.
I guess I'd like to add to that is that it's probably difficult to appreciate how important these sorts of exhibitions can be for people, especially if they feel disenfranchised.
Yeah.
I sometimes harp on about where would I ever give anything to? I'm an immigrant. I'm not local to anywhere. My local museum does not care what I have. It's that sort of feeling that is perpetuated in many groups and in many, in many people for all sorts of different reasons. Why would anyone care what I've got? I don't fit the stereotypical donor to a museum. Whatever the stereotype is in their head, I'm not a rich white person who owns loads of art. Why would anyone care what I do?
My ancestors sort of in this picture, something. Do you want
it? But why would they care about what I have and stuff like that, right? So it is genuinely so important. And I'm delighted every time I see an exhibition end with or start with, please add to this. We need your stories, because that is a much more powerful call than I think most maybe museum people realize. I don't think you understand how powerful that can be. Your piece of history also matters. It's also
history,
part of it. Well, yeah, it's part of the tapestry.
But it means so much to people then when they are included and they see their place within that. We've spent a lot of time our exhibition opened. We didn't have a launch as such, but we spent time after it opened sort of inviting all the people that had contributed to come and see the finished exhibition, to see how their contribution had been used. And that was really important, to take that time at a sort of individual level and kind of walk people through, show them, have a cup of tea, go through. It's really important, especially for an exhibition on something like the Troubles, to see where their part of the story fits into what we're trying to do in that kind of bigger picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Something I've been thinking about recently in terms of how best to try and capture and represent all those people's stories and experiences. Because, you have the object and you have the caption and stuff, but when you're trying to explain it to somebody, or I'm going around showing somebody the exhibition, I'm aware of all that kind of backstory because I've met the person, I know them, I spent a lot of time with them. And it's like, how do I kind of bring that forward for people to see all these kind of people that are in my head that I have had all that interaction with and all those conversations with, and to really kind of bring them forward, that people get the sense of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have you found that your audience differs from your traditional museum going audience for this gallery, for this exhibition?
Yeah, we found the research we did after it opened that we were finding a lot of first-time visitors, people coming maybe specifically to see that, more international and also younger profile. So that's what we kind of found at the start, which is interesting. And we still kind of record that kind of information and take feedback as well. And we're sort of working on how best to analyze that and almost trying to code the feedback as well in terms of like emotional responses and kind of digging into what is coming through in those feedback forms. But yeah, in terms of the profile, younger, more international, more first-time visitors.
Oh, brilliant. I think we've sort of found that as well with the Nothing About Us Without Us exhibition, and people have sort of people who have been involved have brought their friends along, and I had to drag them to the museum sort of thing, and then they loved it kind of thing. Yeah. So it just interests me that the sort of you've got your traditional museum visitors and then people that we sort of historically, without knowing it, have excluded from museums. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and also interesting in this exhibition, more families than you would have seen in the previous exhibition that I was talking about. That was all black and white images and text. Definitely more families, more kind of intergenerational conversations going on, which is great. Actually, that was one of the things that was suggested in the feedback, whether we could have like a different level of interpretation for kids and young ones, because it's quite difficult, I think, for sometimes parents or grandparents getting asked difficult questions and how do they kind of explain this history. So
yeah. As I mentioned earlier, that the experience that I'm bringing to this episode is not really happened yet. Obviously, Brexit has happened, and as a museum about democracy that I work in, and interestingly, what is the home of the Labour History Archive, Brexit is a really interesting topic because it sort of politically divides the right wing and the left wing perfectly. And that's the whole contention. It's also been a while now. It was 2016 and it's now 2023. We've been actively collecting, and we've got quite a bit of anti-Brexit material because that is our traditional audience, and also the sort of, in terms of activism, the anti-Brexit side of things tends to be more active. There's more protests, people make more stuff, it seems, and the pro-Brexit side of things has been quite quiet. So
interesting.
I know, and that's just how the different groups work, which is
you'd think the people who essentially won would be more like, have my stuff. But
well, that's the thing. You've got when you saw the People's Vote marches, hundreds of thousands of people, and the pro-Brexit marches were like,
yeah, I suppose. I guess there was more
of people walking up and down, and it's sort of clearly the voting says there at least were equal parts in 2016. And so that interests me from a materials point of view, like as a conservator, as people working to put an exhibition together. How do you, if you've got mainly one side? Yeah, exactly. And if there is no, obviously You've got all sorts of like newspapers, flyers.
Yeah, you get
like
newspaper. I guess you must have like leaflets and stuff where they were like,
yeah.
You should have gotten the bus.
No,
For people who don't know, there was a famous bus with the slogan.
I don't have an air hanger. I can't store
use
that
physical
anywhere.
scale to offset numbers.
Maybe there's a model of the bus. Could you get a model of the bus?
Oh, God. Well, I do have 2 gigantic PVC printed banners.
I mean, that's pretty big.
Well, yeah. They're fantastic. They're so offensive. Like,
oh wow,
it's
I would not
political
enjoy
cartoon. Well, it's political cartoon, which is of course supposed to be offensive.
Yeah, of course,
and this is bringing to the thing that I wanted to talk about as well, which is, God, they're going to get defaced, guys. I don't know what to do about it.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
I want we it's not agreed, but I want to do a decade on exhibition. And I sort
that's
of
a good idea.
accepted these banners, thinking, okay, well, PVC, they're going to be yellow and sticky in like 2 minutes, so we better get them on display before that happens. Well, it's going to be the 10 years on soon, so that's fine. We'll do that. That's about as confirmed as it is in terms of museum programming. The people who actually are allowed to make the decisions have not said anything about that yet. These things are like 3 meters square. I cannot put them in a case. There's 2 of them, so they're going to be on open display. They are going to get defaced, right?
Quite high.
Yeah,
Not
how high can you
enough.
hang them?
Not high enough, I don't think. That's interesting.
I sort of thought
though.
that because you're a banner hanging place, that maybe you had like very tall ceilings, but maybe not in the space you're thinking of.
We do, but then that's a nightmare for accessibility, guys.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
You can't touch them, but you also can't see them.
Good point. You might have to have like a little replica further down.
Yeah. You can deface this one.
But honestly, I think that generally would be fine. It's a space that leaves room for a reaction. Is maybe where I'm going with it.
Yeah, leaves room for a reaction. I like that. So we did.
I mean, it's probably going to be abuse, but yeah.
I mean, people's reactions can be fiery, particularly on the topic of Brexit. Karen, have you had any problems along those lines in your gallery, and I'm talking about the temporary exhibitions as well and the traveling stuff. Has anyone disagreed physically with the displays?
Nice way of putting that.
Because it's one thing writing a cross review in the book, isn't it, or TripAdvisor, and stropping off to the cafe, but it's another thing getting your biro
to get out a marker pen.
Yeah.
I can't say that we have. We do get challenges. We do get people that sort of maybe feel something's missing or overrepresented or underrepresented, the same as anybody would. We kind of try and respond to that. And as I said, the gallery is sort of designed to be able to respond to that. So there was somebody that came forward and felt the peace train first of all said that peace movements hadn't been represented. So I went back and we were discussing there's Mairead Maguire's Nobel Peace Prize, there's all these different objects in the exhibition relating to peace movement, but then when I drilled down into it, it was actually the peace train that went between Dublin and Belfast he was talking about. And we actually didn't have much on that in the collection, so I was just saying to him, like, happy to include that, but we actually don't have anything. Do you have anything? And he was able to share his story and photograph as part of our personal testimony, so we could build that in. So it's kind of just working with people in terms of sometimes it's just a genuine gap in the collection, and it's kind of like help us to tell that story then. So that was one where we were able to feed it back into the gallery and make that change quite quickly. But yeah, we do get all kinds of comments, and we then put them on a screen. So there's sort of a station where you can give feedback, but there's an AV screen above that where we'll put the comments up for others to see. And that was part of, again, just trying to encourage that dialogue and conversation with our audience, that you can respond to what somebody else has said, or you can leave your own comment. So even if it is something quite critical about the gallery, it will go up on that screen for others to respond to.
I find that so interesting that you could have 2 people standing next to each other in a gallery with 2 absolutely opposing views and experiences of the same event or the same series of events, and they both get a positive experience out of that.
And quite often we'll try and sort of juxtapose objects to get those different perspectives across as well. There's, like, for example, in the central feature, there's a bomb disposal robot that would have been used by army technical officers, but right behind that is a bin lid that nationalist communities would use to warn of the army entering the area in the community. So it's kind of like
wow,
almost offsetting different attitudes around, in that case, the army. Or there's a case on hunger strikes, but within that is a poster that would have been carried in protest outside the prison that says the murderers had a choice, the victims had none. So it's quite often we'll try and again, in the security forces case, there would be the sort of things that you'd expect, like a rubber bullet, CS gas, handgun, things that security forces were using. But there's also a helmet that was worn by an officer. It was struck in the head by a petrol bomb. So it's like, yes, these are being fired, but at the same time, serving officers are being attacked. So it's, trying to bring those different perspectives together.
Wow. You're sort of confronting people with the disagreement almost in a way that can't be disagreed with.
It's spicy.
It is spicy. It's amazing. So one of the things that in my museum we often discuss, but we rarely have time. It's a sort of a space thing, but it's also a time thing. And that is, as a museum about, modern politics, modernish politics, we want to be reactive to what's happening today. I suppose what I'm asking is, what's happening now? Because obviously things are all over the place, rather unsettled for a number of different reasons. Are you seeing a change in the audience? Are you seeing a change in the interaction? And is there anything, are you feeling the need to react to the news?
I'm feeling the need to update the gallery, as I said, with contemporary collecting and these kind of exhibitions. It dates so quickly. So we have objects in there relating to Brexit and campaign for equal marriage. That's gone through now. So it's like already that needs updated. And in terms of everything that's going on at the minute, in relation to protocol and everything else, that kind of thing, it's quite a challenge to keep pace with that because it's still evolving all the time, and there's almost like a bit of a lag there in terms of what we can then collect, represent it, and then building that into the content. So I'm conscious at the minute that final section at the minute, the exhibition goes by decade chronologically. So that final section, definitely my next priority would be to update that. And that is a challenge because as soon as I do that, it'll have changed again. But I think people understand that. And just to your point about saying, is there a difference in kind of the reaction within the gallery? I'm not sensing that yet. I think that might be something that comes through in the feedback because interestingly, quite often the comments that come through, sometimes, yes, it is something very specific on the exhibition, but a lot of the time it's like a wider commentary on the kind of current situation or frustration with maybe a political stalemate at the time or whatever might be going on. So some of that comes through in the feedback where it's actually not the exhibition that they're angry or frustrated at, it's the wider kind of political process. And it'd be interesting to see if those kind of comments start coming through and just in the conversations that we're having with groups and that kind of interaction in this space. For us, we're dealing with such a wide range and such a spectrum in terms of the extent to which people were affected by the Troubles.
Yeah.
And also like where people are with that in terms of it's so individual and so personal. Some people are really ready to engage with that kind of history. Some people don't want to come anywhere near it. When we were doing the engagement around it, I was meeting people, doing outreach in the community, and people were saying, whatever that exhibition looks like, I'll not be coming to it. Whatever you put in it.
Wow.
The fact that it's on the Troubles, I'm not coming. So you're kind of dealing with everything from that to people. I've had a guy come in who has PTSD that came in with a support worker and said how much it helped him. Because that's where the context of what happened to him, it's where it makes sense for him. And his story is one of the personal testimonies, and he said it really helps him to know that's there. So some people find it really useful to be in that space and to explore some of what happened. And some people, say they're not going to cross the front door. So you've got such a spectrum in terms of how ready people are in that sense and how the extent to which people are affected. And even in terms of the, I mentioned earlier about the feedback forums where we take comments. And one of the final questions is, do you have a story that you want to share? And more than one person's written, not yet. So it's like they've walked around, they've looked at the exhibition. They do have something, but they're not ready to share it yet. And that's absolutely fine. And maybe they'll come back, maybe they won't.
Yeah, but not yet isn't a completely closed door. I think that's interesting. It still leaves something ajar there. That's quite, that's quite positive in some ways.
Yeah.
So I don't know where this would fit in any episode, but I'm in Cairo and I've just gone into the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, and it's a new museum. It's not the new museum, and I just wanted to record something because it's just an immediately magnificent experience and space. So I believe at the moment it's just one room with underneath stairs going down where the royal mummies are, and they are sitting directly underneath an inverted pyramid, which is just really, really beautifully done. And they're labelled the royal mummies in 2 languages, so it's not one of these like surprise things. And there's a sort of, there's a weird light show kind of arena situation just before you get to them, but I'll go down there in a bit and see what that's like. So it's one big room with that at the centre of it, and wow, 2 huge textile pieces to my left and large cases. The light levels are beautiful. Some open display stone, mosaic, and I'm just blown away, actually, to be honest. I kind of want to cry. I don't know why. It's just gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. And there's naturally, first case is some rather fun mounting of stone tools in perspex of like 1 centimetre, bit more, like 12 mil perspex, and they're in cutouts with little arms to keep them in place. That's really interesting. And some skeletal remains. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, obviously, but it's just a timeline. It is a timeline, guys. Beautiful. Gorgeous mounting, all perspex as far as I can see. Beautiful. Well done, whoever's involved in this. Mwah. Chef's kiss. So I've gone down into the royal mummies display area, and they've set it up as though it's a tomb, so everything is black marble, and you're funneled around and you're not allowed to take photos or touch or any of the things. It's all really sensitive and replicating, I suppose, how they would have been laid to rest. The people would have been laid to rest to begin with the name, information about the person's life, and then the I can't remember the name of the symbol in the oval, the name in the oval. Can't remember the words right now. They're really nicely displayed. They've each got their own data loggers in them, and they're on little Tyvek mattresses shaped to fit in the cases. And it's really nice. It's really nicely done. I just don't know how I feel about them not being where they were left. And I've not really ever felt like that before. But, this is as sensitive as it can be. As sensitive. So, wonderful. Okay, some more thoughts. There seem to be, specific ways that some of them are displayed. Like one covered by a star ceiling, because that's what they discovered in the tomb. One in a sort of pit in the gallery. Different orientations, that kind of thing. And I'm wondering whether that's even so far as the orientations and stuff, is that because of that's where they were pointing in the tombs that they were found in? And that's the impression that this gives, and it's really wonderful that it's not necessarily for the visitors. It's not explained. It's not pointed out, like the star ceiling isn't pointed out, but it seems to be for the people, the individuals who are buried here. Are they buried here now? Is this their final resting place? Is this a halfway house? Friend Virginia is laughing at me. Is this a halfway house to reburial? I hope so. So I thought we were done. We had cake. We were heading to cake, and then there was a nice man in front of another set of doors, and he said, "Textiles?" And I said, And turns out there's a whole textiles hall, and I'm standing in front of it behind the little screen, so I don't actually know what it looks like. So I'm going to have a look at it now. And, oh my god, it's huge. It's huge. And there's a top floor. I mean, an upstairs. There's wow. Okay. Oh, nice. Big rug hung over 2 floors. Oh, and there's the tent makers stuff, which is it's applied work, but it's a little bit like quilting, I suppose. A bit. I'm gonna have a look at it. Oh my god. Oh, it's wonderful. Mounted costume, mounted open display costume. Brave. I wonder what the cleaning is like on that. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Perfect. Depictions of... Oh, hello, Tracy. Hello. I'm recording again for the podcast. Laughs silently, so it's not to be heard. It's depictions of cloth and textiles manufacture and depictions of clothing, of course, obviously, and bed coverings and descriptions of the type of fibre and dyes and... Akhet Otep is wearing a long garment decorated with a representation of the goddess Pat Hathor. The design of the garment refers to the wearer's wealthy priestly profession. It shows that Egyptians had distinct uniforms of different occupations. Oh, nice mounting system. Love a T-bar. Love a T-bar. Can't go wrong. Open display costume cleaning verdict. All right. It's all right. Teeny bit dusty in places, but it's clearly maintained really nicely. Some really gorgeous little shoes as well, and then descriptions of the shoes of the single lady and widow's shoes. Amazing. I sound rushed because I am rushed, because the museum is closing in 30 minutes and we still have to do the gift shop, and I didn't know it was here, so I'm in a rush, but still wanting to record thoughts.
Hey guys, Jenny here. As much as we love creating this podcast, it's not a paying gig. But with your help on Patreon, we can continue producing new episodes and bringing you these kinds of conversations that hopefully inspire and inform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep going, doing what we absolutely love, even though we don't actually get paid for it. Speaking of which, I just want to extend a really warm welcome to our latest patron, Beth. Thank you so much for joining our absolute bunch of champions. And if you, like Beth, would like to join us and support our work, then you can go to patreon.com/thecword. And for as little as $1 a month, you can help this show keep going. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for listening. We're The C Word, and you've been listening to Karen Logan, Kloe Rumsey, and me, Jen Mathiasson. Join us next time for an episode about working with adult learning. In the meantime, check out our website at thecword.show, tweet us at The C Word Podcast, find us on the Fediverse at The C Word Podcast @glamorous, or simply email us on thecwordpodcast@gmail.com. Intro and outro music is Spring by Didi Music, used under Creative Commons Attribution License. Additional music and sound effects by Callum Robertson. This has been a Wooden Dice production.